I think we may be live.
Hello? Hello? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going back to the first part of the presentation. I'm going to introduce myself and all the people here. Okay, my name is Juan Monzón, and today I'm going to be the host of this event. I hope you hear me very well. I'm going to check. Okay, the sound is up. Someone. Okay, Pierre, thank you very much. Okay, this event will be the first one with this fantastic company, Sngular and Pactflow, joining together to show more about what we usually do in our work. As you already know, this event is all about quality assurance, and we have technical problems like everyone in the world. Okay, I want to introduce our colleagues and friends from quality assurance for the team of Sngular. Here next to me, it's Francisco Moreno, the head of quality assurance team at Sngular. How is it doing, Alejandro? Sorry, Francisco.
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks, Juan.
Okay, thank you, Fran. Also next to me, it's my other colleague, Alejandro Pena from Sngular also, another member of the QA team. Alejandro, what's going on?
Hi, Juan. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for letting me participate in this talk. And well, as a little bit of context, I usually play the role of architect in my projects, and I was part of the team that was working on the project that we are going to talk about, example case.
Okay, thank you very much, Alejandro. Okay, in the other part of the screen, we have Alicia Foreman. This is now the current product marketing manager of Pactflow. Alicia, good morning, good afternoon. I don't want to say because you are in the other part of the world.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm based here in Melbourne, Australia, and thank you, Juan, for the welcome. I work with the Pactflow team as the product marketing manager, and so excited to be here with on the global stage with you all this morning, this afternoon, this evening.
Okay, thank you very much, Alicia. Also here, Yusuf Nabi, developer advocate at Pactflow. Yusuf, I think you just landed on Pactflow. Very happy to see you here.
I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you so much. I've just joined at Pactflow 3 or 4 weeks ago, and QA is a topic that is very close to my heart. I started off my career as a QA around 14 years ago. Got introduced to microservices and the problems they entailed around 2013, and got involved with the Pact project, the open source project, around 2018. And when I got offered the job at Pactflow to make developers' lives easier, it was a dream come true. So really pleased to be here and hear your journey. Thank you.
Okay, it's interesting, all this information. Thank you very much. Okay, but last but not least, Matt Philos, one of the co-founders of Pactflow. Again, good morning, good afternoon, Matt.
Good morning, Juan and team. Thank you for having me. I echo Alicia's thoughts. It's pretty cool to be on the global stage and working here with you guys. You know, a bit of background as well. You know, I would probably identify more as a developer in my background, you know, cloud and microservices and DevOps. And, you know, I got involved with Pact in about 7 years ago, and have really never looked back. It's been such a great ride. And I'm really excited to hear you guys speak about the work you've done with the great work you've done with one of our customers in the States, and yeah, looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. Okay, it's a pleasure to have all of you here, and I think the first step is to go directly to the agenda, what's going on today here, and I would like to start with the content of this event. Okay. Matt and Alicia will share what is contract testing, and also Yusuf is going to the conversation to talk about one of the new features of Pactflow. It's called bidirectional contract testing. After that, we will start with the part of Sngular, with values of contract testing with Fran and Alex, and of course, the example case study. This will be a very interesting because it's an excellent example to how two partners can work together to achieve something with great value. This part will be conducted with my singulars, Fran and Alex also. Okay, after that we will discuss about the example between us. Okay, everyone is going to be here, Fran, Alex, Alicia, Yusuf, Matt, myself. And after that we are going to open the conversation to all of you. All the questions and answers you are going to put in the chat is going to be here in front of us, and we are going to try to answer everything in the best manner possible. Okay, and now we are going to start with that. Okay, Alicia, Matt, welcome. We are going to start right now. The stage is yours. Welcome, and let's go.
Thanks, Juan. Okay, so let's just get some slides up here. Can you see a slide that just says end-to-end testing, just to make sure we're on the same page? Yep. Okay, great. So we're going to talk about what contract testing is, and we're going to describe a few different types of contract testing, but we can't really talk about contract testing unless we think about really why it was created and what problem it's trying to solve. So let's start with end-to-end testing. So, you know, we're testing distributed systems here, and we all know that microservices, you know, cloud, all these things. And the predominant way most companies still test and make sure that those systems work together is what we call end-to-end integrated testing. And there's a real challenge with end-to-end integrated testing in that when you do it, there's a number of issues, right? If you get it right, you're going to feel pretty confident that your tests work, you know, as expected, because it's got to pass through all the various layers of the system. So when you do that, if you sort of think about how an end-to-end test works, you know, you've got requests that go through all the system. And so, you know, as you see it, you sort of the requests are making its way through the various layers. It's going to talk through the gateway. It's going to talk through a microservice A, microservice B, and you know, eventually it's going to make its way back to the user. And of course, when you do this, this is quite slow. It has to go through all the different layers of the system. It has to, you know, talk to real databases, send real emails, do whatever it is it needs to do. That's slow, but of course, if it works, you're going to feel really confident, right? However, these kinds of tests tend to be quite fragile. And so the issue with that is like when one of the tests fail, you don't know where it's going to fail. Has it failed in microservice A? Has it failed in, you know, in the gateway? You know, you're not going to see the error back at the user at the end of the user's machine, because you're probably going to hide that information. It's going to be hidden in a log somewhere. You don't want to be, you know, spitting out errors all the way back to a user. So now you need to go digging into log files and whatnot to try and understand what's happening. So they're fragile. They're also hard to debug because of that same reason. And if you're testing this way, testing all the systems together, then really you have to release them all together as well. Otherwise, how do you have the confidence that the system works together properly? You don't. So you either have to deploy it all together or only deploy one new thing into that fixed environment, test it from end to end, release that one component, and then introduce a new change, do the same thing, and so on and so on. And of course, what this does is it creates build queues. It creates teams have to wait on other teams to be able to get their systems through to production. So, of course, that creates some challenges. That's going to be really costly for teams. It's going to really much increase the maintenance costs. It's going to increase the time teams have between making changes and releasing, and that's going to lead to batching. And we know batching leads to other kinds of problems. Just going to confirm we've got the right slides up here. We should be on a slide that now says contract testing. I'm not sure if that's the case. Unfortunately, I've got a bit of lag here. So hopefully someone can correct that for me if they can't see that. Thank you. I'm not sure if you can move that forward for me, somebody. Unfortunately, I can't quite see. I'd like to get to the contract testing screen just to talk about the two different types of contract testing. So contract testing is a way to help resolve this problem. So with end-to-end testing, one of the main things you're trying to cover there is, can systems communicate to one another? right? And so the other thing it can do is functional testing. So what we want to do is try to remove a lot of the scope from the end-to-end test and move them into contract testing, which is going to help us cover off, can system A communicate to system B? So there's two types of contract testing here. We talk about, there's the goals of contract testing are to reduce the scope of those end-to-end integrated tests, as we talked about, but also to reduce the reliance on complex test environments. So the common use cases here, again, in a distributed system, things like JavaScript web applications like React or Vue or Angular, native mobile applications, RESTful microservices, so JSON or XML, and even things like gRPC, protobufs, GraphQL are applicable here. And of course, asynchronous messaging. So Kafka is obviously a very common thing these days. We can do contract testing in these use cases. And then, so what actually is contract testing? So really what contract testing aims to do is look at the different integration points on your diagram, your architecture, and test them individually. And so what we want to do is we want to check that those two systems are able to communicate with one another, and by ensuring that they conform to a shared understanding, which we document in a contract. So the way I like to think about it is I can have a conversation with you as a person and say, here's a letter. Can you please take this letter and post it to the mailbox? And as long as the other person can understand what I'm saying, then that's what contract testing tests. It makes sure that we can communicate. What it doesn't do is make sure that my colleague has taken that letter and actually posted it. That's a functional test. We're going to do that through a different means. So contract testing helps us with those communication points. And there are two types of contract testing. There's consumer-driven contract testing using, for example, Pact or Spring Cloud contracts. And that's a record and replay style contract test where the consumer creates a number of tests that generates the expectations a consumer has of a provider. And then later on, we replay those against the provider to make sure that they can communicate. The other type of contract testing is more schema-driven. We have a similar thing on the consumer side where we drive the tests to produce a contract that the consumer needs of a provider. But on the provider side, we actually have its own contract, and then we compare those two contracts. And if those two contracts are compatible, then we're also feeling comfortable that they're able to communicate. So just moving on to the next slide, quickly about Pactflow and where we fit into this whole picture. Pactflow is a contract testing collaboration platform. We built our platform based on Pact initially and have expanded that to other things. And the way to think about our platform and the product is it's a fully managed platform. We also have an on-premises edition, but we've hardened it for enterprise scale. And we implement those two types of contract testing. So you can do consumer-driven contract testing with Pact, or you can actually do what we call bidirectional contract testing, which is our feature that implements the schema-based contract testing we just talked about. And then what we do is we have a number of experiences around the edges of that product that make it easier to do contract testing quickly and at scale, build security into it, and so on. So I'll now hand over to Juan. Thank you very much.
Hello, I think we need to start with your second, or you need to talk about directional contract testing, right?
I'll have a quick go at that. So we don't have any slides for bidirectional, but we'll just quickly talk about some of the objectives of our new feature that's coming out. We've got loads of anchor points you can go to on our website. So you can check out pactflow.io, where you can get a load of information about bidirectional. But just some of the main objectives of the new feature was to kind of reduce the time to value of contract testing, to simplify the adoption and scaling of contract testing, to expand the breadth and technology of the tools we can support. So currently we support open API spec, but we're hoping to extend that soon to other protocols such as GraphQL, protobufs, and API gateways. We'd love to expand the types of ways that contracts can be generated and verified. And as part of that initiative, we've been creating our own set of adapters for popular tools. such as Cypress, Wiremock, and Mock Service Worker. We're coining them with the terms of bring your own tools, and there'll be bring your own tools on both the provider and consumer side. And as this particular event is focused at QAs, we were really keen at Pactflow to expand our user base to other roles, including QAs and testers, because primarily it's needed quite close access to the source code, which has been kind of the reserve of developers, and more so with agile testers in those more collaborative teams. But we still see organizations out there with silos that we are looking to break down. So yeah, if you want to find out more about it, please go and check out our website at pactflow.io, and we'd love to get some feedback about it, and you can help us shape our roadmap in the future. So yeah, thank you very much, and back to you, Juan.
Okay, thank you very much, Joseph. Okay, the next phase of the agenda, I think we need to say hello again to my colleagues, Fran and Alex. Okay, what do you think about this presentation? Do you enjoy it? You know all these things, right?
I mean, I'm pretty excited, to be honest, to start working with this new bidirectional feature. I know we have clients that are very interested in this kind of approach, starting generating contracts from the provider side, not depending so much on the consumer. Well, I'm pretty sure they will be really happy with all of this. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm agree with Alex, because I'm agree with Alex, because well, we've been talking with so many clients, and they don't always be sure about how to implement consumer driven, because they have like a very big APIs, and well, that are the big business, they have the core of all the business, so they are very worried about losing like the API control. So I think the directional contract testing would help a lot here, and is going to be I think it's going to have a huge impact in the technique of contract testing.
I see. Okay. Okay. Very interesting also conversation. I think we need to start now with the next section, guys. These values of contract testing, and also we are very excited to listen a little bit more about the example case study. Fran, Alex, let's do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Juan. So are you seeing the okay? So yeah, well, first of all, I'm going to introduce myself, because I didn't do it before. So my name is Fran, Francisco Moreno. I'm the QA director of Sngular. I live in Spain, in Asturias, in the north of Spain, which is a very pretty place. And yeah, I discovered contract testing like 4 or 5 years ago. I like I don't know how to say, I fell in love with this tool and with this technique, because I've been working as a QA for, I think, for 15 years now. With this, with all of these microservices and distributed architecture, I have a lot of trouble to try to test these kind of things. When I discovered, I started reading about this tool. My first thought was, this is it. I mean, this is the right tool to do it. So yeah, since that I wrote some articles, and I've been talking to Matt several times. Yeah, we started a very good relationship. So from this relationship, it started the partnership between Sngular and Pactflow. We've been partners for a year, I think, now. Yeah, Matt trained us a year ago. A group here in Sngular, not only QA people or testing people, but also developers. So yeah, we spent like a few days together. Was really nice. we learned a lot from him and from this tool, and was really amazing to have the creator of the tool with us. So we are Sngular. We have presence in Europe, US, and Singapore, while also in Latin, Mexico. And I think we are the only partner in US at these days. So that's something interesting. So as I said before, you can visit our website at sngular.com, and you can see some few articles about contact testing that we wrote, in case you may have a look. So yeah, what's the value of contract testing? Why contract testing? What are the main challenges we find in the market and with our clients? Nowadays, we see that time to market is something crucial. Okay, so everyone wants to be fast, but also reliable. I mean, there's make no sense if you go fast and you have a bugs in production, because they have a very big impact, not only in revenue but also in reputation, which is something very important nowadays. Okay, so for this in this kind of scenario, okay, that we want to be fast, also the testing must adapt. Okay, it makes no sense nowadays that testing to be a bottleneck anymore. Okay, so we have to change our mindset and adapt the testing to something more agile, and that something that actually adds value to the whole process of the delivery. And also work in, put focus in prevention, okay, not in detection. It's more useful to prevent bugs, not rather than detect them. Okay. Yeah, so for this kind of scenarios, contract testing fits very well, because would allow us to detect bugs in early stages, and also to deliver quicker, because allow the teams to work independently and waste less time, and they don't have dependencies each other, which is something very very good when you want to deliver fast. Okay, so in this case study with this large US company, what was the case? I think for most of you probably sounds familiar, because this was a company with a legacy system, a monolith legacy system that wants to break down in some microservices. So they want to do this in a fast, safe, and cheap way. Okay, they don't want to spend a lot of money in this. So how do you actually accomplish that? Okay. Well, as you can see in the slide, there are several ways to do it, but the key aspects is to reduce the feedback loop. Sorry. Remove the dependencies from the teams, so they can develop faster. And when something goes wrong, you don't want to spend too many time in debugging. Okay, it's always better, because it adds more value, as I said, that you spend your time in developing new features than in correcting bugs or debugging. Okay. Also, if you wanted to reduce the cost, one I mean, a lot of money it's spent in testing or integration infrastructure. Okay, so this is one of the main points. You can actually reduce the cost. So contract testing fits here very well because allows the team to run all the tests locally in their laptops, so that they don't need to deploy the applications. The teams don't need to deploy the applications in order to know if the applications would communicate well to each other. So this a huge improvement in terms of on speed and cost. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So at the end, what we done in order to improve the delivery, with contract testing, we introduce contract testing in the delivery pipelines. So when every time the teams make a commit, starts this pipeline and start checking everything in order to verify that systems can communicate each other. So you don't have to wait to start your end-to-end testing or even API testing to know that your system it's okay, because at the end, obviously your systems are not isolated from the rest. So you have to check that everything is fine, and contract testing is one really good solution for this kind of testing, because we've seen many times that a lot of errors came from this kind of situations that systems actually can't communicate to each other. Okay. Okay. So slide. Okay. So we had this company. This company was about 40 teams, and they have 200 applications running. So more or less the size of this kind of company are the complexity of the systems. Okay, so we have them in. You can see the slide in these points. Okay, so just to recap like big numbers. The company was about 40 teams. The average number of people working in each team was about six. Stack was mostly Java for the backend. Java, Spring Boot, Docker. The Sngular team, we started four of us: a project manager, a QA lead, QA architect, and a DevOps guy. The distribution was like this with a four people team. We started working with 2 teams. Okay, we have like 11 stakeholders inside this company. Okay, so what how we did that? Okay, for us, Alex will have more. Will give you more detail right now. But just to a brief introduction. We knew because we've done this not with contract testing, but with other techniques and other technologies. We've done this in Sngular in many projects. So at the end, you have to obviously you have to have the stakeholder buy-in. So you need you have to be aligned with the CISO of the company, CTOs or CEOs maybe, like a C-level. So also the stakeholder must to have to believe in this practice. Okay, and then it's very important to start with a POC. This makes no sense. obviously not in a 40 team company. To start with 1 or 2 teams, start working together with them, and run a POC just to demonstrate that this actually could work. Okay, so they have to believe, they have to see that this actually works, and this could improve this daily job. Also, we at the end we set up a group of practice. Just to continue with this job, okay? With this job that we have done. The point of the POs of the GOP, sorry, the group of practice, is to support the rest of the team and facilitate to scale up all of these contact testing technique to the whole organization. Okay, so this is something that Alex will give you more details about this, but this is something really important in the adoption of a new technique. Okay, so at the end, it took us like not even 4 months, less than 4 months. You see 7 sprints, 2-week sprint. Okay, the first sprint was mostly a discovery. Okay, so we get involved with all the stakeholders. We started to know all the technology, all the stacks, all the processes, or a discovery. Okay, the contract testing work started in the second sprint with this POC. We started working with 1 team, 2 sprints before or 1 sprint before with the other team. At the end, we will work in parallel with two teams. So we started with training, workshops, explaining them how it works, and also do pair programming with them in order to actually develop all the tests and build all the pipelines in their actual projects. Okay, the actual application, not only the workshop, because the workshop were like an example that we built inside Sngular, but at the end we implement contract testing in their applications. Okay, and yeah, the last 3 sprints. Well, actually this work was not sequentially, it was in parallel. Because we started a group of practice like I don't know, in the 3rd week or in the 4th week, more or less. And yeah, we start to define the KPIs, to start working how to get all the metrics and how to get all the data in order to send all the stakeholders a report about the progress of the implementation of the practice and the adoption, how everything was going on. And the group practice was very interesting because a lot of ideas, a lot of things came up. And yeah, we have to think about many solutions, how to improve the adoption. And now my colleague Alex is going to explain, he's going to give you more details about all of this. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fran, for all this explanation and introduction. Well, as I commented at the beginning of this event, I was part of the team that was working on site with this client. So now I will try to give a little overview about how we faced this project and what we were able to achieve. So, okay, we should be seeing the group of practice slide right now. And although group of practice was not really active until the first pilots were pre-advanced, it was the first thing we have to work to have clearly defined. Simplifying very much, the duties of the group of practice are basically to follow the progress of the implementation and help teams and managers to move forward. To achieve this, we rely on different tools or tasks you can see on screen. First of all, we need a reliable and well-defined metrics that will allow us to track the progress and construct valuable feedback about how the methodology is improving or helping the teams. then we need to have a clear definition about the whole process, the processes actually. I mean, when a team wants to onboard on the methodology, we need to explain them, well, the process to follow, information about how they day by day will change, the SDLC changes, giving best practice related recommendations, and so on. We also should define good communication channels in order to facilitate information exchange. When starting, all the teams will have a lot of questions and needs, so having open sessions, regular meetings, or even a dedicated Slack channel or in any other communication tool you can use, well, it's really helpful. And finally, the tracking, generating reports, share information about the progress, the results, the improvements, but with not only the stakeholders, but also with the development teams, because we want to have everyone engaged and make everyone understand that the group of practice is here to help and support, not just to be watching, right? Okay, so we know what we are doing with the group of practice. Next step would be start working with your first teams, right? The pilots. So the first challenge we faced, at least, is that you need to gain the teams. You need to convince them that this new way of work you're proposing is going to make their life easier, not the opposite. It's very common to find some kind of resistance. Each team has their own deadlines, their own sprints, their own problems. And you are here talking about something they can feel as more workload. Good point, honestly, at least in my experience, is that this methodology, the contract testing, gives you so valuable feedback and so fast that technical people used to fall in love pretty quick. Everyone likes to know when something is wrong instantly instead of finding it when in some environment, right? So in our case, we started with a couple of tech talks with our pilot teams. The first one focused on the theory. Second one more focused on the practice, doing a workshop, basically. Also, what we did with the teams after these tech talks was to agree some objectives and define how we were going to face the adoption. The approach we decided to take was to establish one developer that was going to reserve time and be working with us, doing pair programming, implementing the first contracts, basically ensuring a good learning of the methodology and creating a new expert on contract testing, right? After that, this developer can share this knowledge with the team so they can start working more or less independently. Of course, group of practice should keep tracking the progress and keep giving all the technical support needed. At this stage, actually, is when the role of what we call contract testing champions takes relevance. Contract testing champion will be basically a developer that can help to spread the knowledge. This developer should have a deep understanding about well, contract testing, all the technique. Proactive person and really engaged with the technique. So okay, you already are working with your first teams. The next step would be to start finding the metrics you want to use. So which kind of metrics we decided to gather? We started with the quantitative ones, okay? And we classified these metrics into engagement and impact. Here in the slide, you should be seeing the most significant ones. Regarding the engagement, those three included are really, really important. The good thing is that they are pretty easy to obtain because you can get these metrics from Pactflow or your code directly. For example, the first one, the use of can I deploy, is going to show you how much teams are relying on Pactflow for the deploys, meaning that they are in the late game, I mean, advances the stage doing full use of the solution. Okay, the second one which is talking about how many teams are having contracts in Pactflow, can show you, well, the number of teams that are in progress. They are starting to generate contracts, but maybe not using yet the platform to manage the deployments. So you can track here an evolution, well, an evolution of the implementation of the technique. Finally, the coverage, which is pretty crucial to make an idea about how safe are being our deployments with Pact. I mean, of course, you want to have the 100% coverage of your endpoints in an ideal scenario. Okay, regarding the impact metrics, the more we can have, the better. Thanks for passing the slide. But I have to say that some of them sometimes could be really complicated to gather. I mean, depending on the way the company internally works, it could give you some problems. For example, we had for us was pretty complicated to define or obtain the lead time for change because of the way the tickets were tracked in Jira inside this company. So moving to the next slide, not all the metrics are quantitative. We also need to track the qualitative ones. Okay, we need to track also how the teams feel about this new methodology. If they are really feeling that this is improving their day by day, making their work easier, because at the end, this is one of the main targets, make the developers' life easier. To accomplish this, in our case, we decided to use anonymous surveys so we can have more honest feedback from the dev teams. Well, from the dev teams, but also from the management or whoever wants to share their thoughts, right? Actually, it was really, really useful. You can obtain a lot of good information when you are not forcing people to share it in public meetings. And okay, until here, I was talking about the. Now I'm going to try to explain a little bit the results we got. So in the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit these results. Keep in mind that this project was inside a huge company. I mean, highly regulated, and at the beginnings are always pretty slow in this kind of contest. But anyway, in only 7 sprints, we were able to train 2 full teams and 4 contract testing champions. We gave coverage to 6 big and important endpoints. These endpoints were part of the core business of the company. And even with 2 of the 10 Jenkins corporative pipelines ready to work with Pactflow, already integrated, ready to be used. But the most important point, at least in my opinion, is that thanks to this work, we were able to identify 2 bugs that were present in production environments. And that was a very important milestone for us because it showed the real potential of this technique in order to prevent bugs, to avoid these bugs getting to any environment. Regarding times for your reference, well, it took like about 8 hours to develop our first contract testing test, and about 3 weeks to have the first pipeline integration. And on the next slide, we can continue talking about results. And here we are going to talk a little bit about numbers and savings. The company itself did this estimation. You are going to see, or you are seeing on the screen. I don't know it. It was not done by us, to be honest. The thing is that they were investing a lot of time in end-to-end testing because of this situation. They were migrating from a legacy architecture to a new microservice architecture with binding services in between. So it was a complicated situation. And as I was saying, they were investing an enormous amount of time on end-to-end. And based on the results we had from this proof of concept, these 2 pilots, they estimated that they can save about 66% of the time invested in end-to-end testing, which implies directly a 66% of saving on costs. But actually, the savings could be even more. I mean, because this is a very simple approach, and we are not taking into account things like for example, the time spent by developers to fix bugs that were detected in the end-to-end testing, right? Because a big percentage of that bugs will never get to that stage once we have included the contract testing. And even more, we are not including in this estimation the cost to provision the environments for the end-to-end testing. I mean, you are using AWS cloud or any other cloud, or even on-premise servers, it could be a significant amount of money you can save. And another thing to keep in mind is that the invested time on developing and invested in contract testing implementation will improve over the time. I mean, it will be less over the time. Teams will have more knowledge about the technique. They will include it as a natural step inside their development process. The maintenance even is evolutive. I mean, meanwhile, on the other side, end-to-end testing can only grow when your system gains complexity. I mean, it will always depend on the context of each company, of course. But I think it's clear it has the potential to reduce costs significantly. And okay, so learnings. What did we learn from Sngular during this project and during this exercise? Here I have just 3 points to highlight. The first one would be that the contract testing champion role, even though it's a funny name, is a key role. I mean, they are so important in order to help the contract testing team to share the knowledge and give support, and even with time take ownership of the practice. In our case, they were crucial in helping us to gain confidence among other teams. Think about it. I mean, this company has more than 40 different teams we need to engage in, and without this kind of role, it would be well, much slower process. Second one is the GOP, the group of practice, is also a must. I mean, their role collecting feedback, basically taking decisions and action in order to have a smooth transition and progress is also crucial. It's also very, very useful to have the stakeholders involved. We were very lucky, to be honest, in that sense, because we had involved in the group of practice managers, a couple of tech leads, and even the CTO. Because at the end, these are the people with authority and capacity to really push forward when needed. So having them in the group of practice is a really huge boost. And finally, the monitoring metrics. It's going to be a new practice. Everybody wants to have a good and useful information about how it's impacting in your development process, this methodology. Metrics will be the main tool to do that. Based on them, we will know how things are going. We want it to be the more, the better. And it will be always a good idea to invest any time needed in generating the sources for that good metric you need. And okay, and that's pretty much all from my side. Personally, for me, it was a really incredible experience. I really enjoyed a lot helping our friends to start using this methodology. And honestly, I'm a true believer in the potential it has. It's like 8 months working with contract testing, more or less, and I'm totally in. And that's all. Thanks for listening during this time, and feel free to ask any question whenever Juan lets you do it.
Okay. Okay, thank you, both of you. Thank you. This was very, very, very interesting. I learned a lot. Okay, I think now it's time to talk a little bit about this example. Matt, Joseph, Alicia, do you want to join us? And also, who wants to be the one who start breaking the ice? Who wants to start?
I'm not one to sit on my hands, so I'll take the first question. I loved your case study. It was really, really good to see. And I think seeing the transformative change it can have in organizations as they stop having conversations about broken end-to-end build is really interesting to see. The group of practice I found was really interesting to kind of cement good engineering practices and principles. Did you see the organization use that? Were they using that in other areas for other kind of big kind of transformational shifts other than contract testing, or is that something you'd introduced for contract testing and you'd potentially use that pattern elsewhere?
Do you want to talk, Frank?
Alex?
Yeah,
well,
go ahead.
Well,
no, go ahead.
I think we're gonna say the same probably. For us, the group of practice was something crucial in order to introduce a new practice. So in this case, was contract testing because it was something really, really new. This company has, we have to be honest, they have a little bit of knowledge of contract testing, but only a few people. They have, they run few experiments, but not so much. So for us, the group practice was something key in order to introduce this new technique. So it's not only for contract testing. Could work for any other practice that you want to introduce and to scale in the whole organization. Because maybe if you, I don't know, imagine you want to introduce a new security practice only for the DevOps team or something like this. Maybe you don't need a GOP. But if you want to introduce this in the whole organization in 40 teams or 30 or 20 teams, you will need something like this. And it's important to start like baby steps. For one, starting from 1 or 2 teams, and then because you have to generate like advocates inside the company, because this is something that usually happens to us because we are a consultants company. So I think no one likes to someone came from outside and tell you what to do and you are doing the things in the wrong way. I have like the knowledge and the truth. So this is not the kind of work that usually work at the end. So for us it's better to introduce the practice in little teams, and then like themselves get convinced and they trust in this tool and this technique, and start working like with the contract testing champions in this case, to start working with the rest of the organization and themselves. The group of practice is meant to be something transitory. I mean, something that maybe has no sense to be like more than 1 year or 2 years. I don't know, but something that eventually should disappear. When the practice is established in the organization, it's fine. It's fine. So I don't know if you, Alex, want to add something.
Yeah, just for completing, I mean, I have seen this kind of organism in other organizations related to a different practice. Sometimes instead of group of practice, it's been called Center of Excellence or any other name, but basically it's a group of people that will be looking to make a follow of the technique and push forward when needed. Actually, Pierre is asking how did we ensure that the teams did not move to the final of their backlog, the tickets, and this is basically the role of the group of practice, and this is why it's very important to have people like managers, tech leads, or involved, because they have the authority to say, hey, do not let this sink in your backlog, just do it now. We have a final date where we are going to start deploying using this, so you need to move forward, blah, blah, blah. It's much easier if you have people from the inside than if you come just like a vendor to say, hey, you have to do this because I say so.
So Alex, just in terms of taking that question from Pierre, and thanks for the question, Pierre, I'll just read it out just so people can understand what we're looking at. It was, how do you ensure that onboarded teams don't put contract testing tickets at the back of the backlog? Did you face any difficulties? So the way I see that, and I want to ask the question of you guys as well, is, I think you can flip this around and say, what are the common objections you get to rolling out, pact and contract testing? And, maybe I can talk to, one of those objections is, we've got other things to do. We're so busy, we've got this gigantic product backlog, and now we've got this other thing we've got to do, right? To get a, to check off a definition of done. So what did you do, and what were some of the lessons in overcoming those objections? How do you say, yes, we've got to write some more tests, but it gives us this extra value? And how did you have that conversation in addition to the things you said around, the community of practice or the group of practice?
That sense, well, if you remember, I said that what we did with this client was prepare to take talks at the beginning with all the teams. In the first one, which is theoretical, explaining what you have been explaining, what is contract testing, all that stuff. This was the typical meeting where people start complaining and start to freak out because they say, oh, how is going to the consumer to define the contracts for the provider, these kind of questions. But the second one, which is the workshop, the technical, where you are showing the capabilities and how I'm detecting this bug and this problem, all that stuff, at that point is when, in my experience, you start to gain the people, because at that moment people say, oh, okay, that happened to me, last month, and I was until 2 a.m. fixing that bug in production. And if I make this effort and I do these tests, maybe I don't have this kind of problem. So this was my experience. This is why I was saying that technical people, when they see it working, tend to like it.
Yeah, well, I would like to add some insights here. The main objections, I think, are the same of unit testing, for example. It's why do we have to do that? We don't have time. This is time consuming. This is the same. But I mean, first of all, I think they have to be aware that they have a problem. I mean, first of all, they have to feel the pain or of not having tests or not having contract testing or integration tests. But I think that they have to be aware of the problem. And then you have to start working with them prepare testing with them, and you have to help the team to have the first contract testing in place. So when they see what we saw in this client, when they see that this is actually works and reduce the manual testing that they do, they start to believe. They start to think, well, maybe it's worth to spend some time doing this, because at the end we have to be honest. This is not something very, very complex, because the code is really easy. It's more complex to build the pipelines. The pipelines, this is something complex, and you have to work a lot with the team. But implementing this kind of test is not so much time consuming, because the code that you have to generate is not so much. There are small classes. If you know the technique, it's not really difficult. I always say to developers, you write more complicated code than this code.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. But I mean, I can bet my house. I bet my house, and you write more complicated code than this. So this is not so much time consuming. And when they are starting to see that things actually breaks when they make a mistake, they start to feel that, well, this is something that could be useful. But I repeat, at the first place, they have to be conscious that they have a problem, and they have to feel the problem in production that a huge error and we don't know what's happening, what's going on. We lose a lot of time. So when you work with teams that have been in these kind of situations, it's easier to introduce this technique.
Absolutely.
I'd like to jump in and ask a question. I think in the case study, Fran and Alex, you spoke about, I guess, the business outcomes and that sort of general sentiment. Talking about the team that you're working with at the client, how are they feeling now about this new practice that they've implemented? Is there a better sentiment around, I guess, general, daily happiness in their roles? Is there anything that you can share on that front?
Well, as far as I know, they are moving forward. Yeah, they are. I don't know how to say. Happy with the implementation. For they, it was a huge improvement due to the situation they were facing. They were in the middle of this migration from the legacy to the new microservice architecture on the cloud. They have tons of bridge services that were not the final microservice they were working. So there were a lot of new communications they need to start testing. And they were having bugs. They were having these problems from was talking before. They were feeling the pain of these kind of problems. So it took some time to start, because I'm agree that it's very easy to develop this kind of test, but there is also a mind change you need to do about how to design it, right? Because you have to focus just on the communication, not on the behavior. And as developers, we tend to check the behavior. It's your natural tend. So once the key point, I think it was, since we have a couple of contract testing champions, because then we have this help inside the teams to start explaining to the rest of them, and not relying only in these external people we have just known since 2 weeks. And yeah, as far as they know, they are pushing forward. So, yeah.
Good to hear. Thanks.
Okay, more questions here.
Yeah. Also, just to add something that Alex just said, this client was at the beginning, as well. Alex said before, was very interested in bidirectional contract testing. So it's something that they were asking us like every 2 weeks, Alex, in every planning. They were asking about what about bidirectional? What about bidirectional?
Yeah.
So now maybe they want to move forward like a more, I don't know, more intense. Yeah.
I know they are gonna be very, very happy about this new feature.
So I guess the question there, you talk about those objections we had earlier. I guess a really common question, if you go and look at like our open source forums, the question we get probably once a week from somebody is, can we generate our contract test from something like a Swagger document or an Open API document? So if you talk about some of the objections or reasons why people find excuses not to do contract testing, one of them is that. And I think the other one is, well, we've already got unit tests that mock out our backend, and we've already got tools that test our provider. Why do we need to go and do packed testing again on top of all of that? So that's the scene for why bidirectional contracts was created at Pactflow. Basically, the idea being, on the consumer side, you can continue to use Pact, or if you're using tools like WireMock or Mountebank or whatever mocking tool you've got, you can convert those into a consumer contract. So the idea being, you can really quickly take whatever you've already done and get more value from it by turning it into a contract. And on the provider side, if you do use Open API spec, and down the track we'll be supporting other types of contracts on the provider side or specifications, if you've already got good testing coverage of that to make sure that your provider is compatible with the spec, what we'll do at Pactflow is we'll make sure that those two things stay in alignment. So it's a little bit different than the consumer-driven one we talked about earlier. Bidirectional has 2 contracts, and we make sure that they stay compatible. And so, one of the big issues we see with Open API spec is it's a really good tool for documenting your API, and it's a good communication tool. The issue, of course, is it's really easy for providers to change the spec and to change the implementation to be compatible with that spec. But now it's no longer compatible with its, its service community, the consumers. And so that's the bidirectional feature. So I'm glad to hear that, maybe that's going to help, help your customer do that, and maybe do it quicker in some cases.
Also, Matt, one thing I listen a lot in our clients, and well, honestly, I have to say I thought the same back in the past, was that contract testing. They told us, okay, for a greenfield project, works fine. What happened in a project that is in production for, I don't know, for a year or for 5 years? How do we introduce contract testing in something that is working, and also in some project that we already have API testing, like with Postman or with whatever tool. So the question is, we already have API testing. This is not something new. I mean, this has been working for a while. How do we introduce contract testing? With the consumer-driven contract testing, I think it's something difficult for something that is already working. For new endpoints, it's fine, but for the previous endpoints, you have to think about how to do it in an efficient way. Okay. But with this, I think with this bidirectional contract testing, it would help a lot, because if you already have your API testing with Postman, that's fine. That's fine. That's the proof that that the consumer would have to trust that you have to follow this schema and all of these things. For me, that's a very good point to convince everyone that now is like. You have to understand it. It's like you don't have excuses, because you can use your test that you have right now with Postman or Swagger or OpenAPI. You can use this test to build your bidirectional contract testing. Would help in this way. So now all fits. That's my point of view.
And another uncomfortable situation for consumer driving that, well, at least this client had, is the statistical APIs that were consuming by 2,000 services, and they were always saying, how are we going to consumer driving this test with so many consumers? Which makes sense. I mean, it was going to be difficult, at least. So this kind of approach in that situation also is super, super useful.
Can I ask, just in terms of one other common objection or one challenge to doing contract testing, and maybe it's the elephant in the room, given that the audience we have is that contract testing, particularly the way Pact wants to do that, is it's a white box style test. You need access to the code, and that can make it difficult to do that to do contract testing if you're not either an engineer in that squad, whether a developer or a tester, if you're trying to do it from the outside. So I'm just keen to get your reflections and perspectives on how does contract testing intersect with sort of QAs who may not have access to the code, and I guess how you see the bidirectional maybe working with that as well. Is that something that you experienced on that customer?
In my case, with this customer, we have worked basically with developers, not with the QA teams. But yeah, it makes totally sense. I mean, in this case, the bidirectional approach will open this world to the QA, to the typical QA, because there are QAs that develop actually code to test, but the typical QA focus on the Postman or using external tools. But well, at least in my experience until now, I have worked with development teams. So
yeah, I think that's a really good point, and one that Fran made before about teams having existing testing tool sets that are already providing value. So where the sell is where we can provide you that same value, but earlier in your development life cycle. So enabling that kind of shift left, and I think that enabling the power of contract testing against a specification with the existing tool set is a really exciting, valuable proposition. it's really exciting to hear that your customers and teams are really excited to try it out. I think we've got some questions from the audience.
Yeah, well, thank you for all this information, for this discussion that interesting. What about if...
Juan, did you have a question? Any more questions from our...
Yeah,
or I can jump in.
I think we are going to change to the questions. We have like a panel.
I might jump in. So just one from one of our guests. Thank you so much for tuning in. Question is just in terms of contract testing, whether or not it's a widespread, really widespread adoption of that particular technique. What's the group's opinion, I guess, on adoption of contract testing generally?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with that maybe quickly, just around, the tooling adoption. Obviously we've got a bit more visibility in terms of how often the tool gets, used across different languages and things like this. So, talking about Pact.js, for example, which is one of the languages I help maintain, each year we're seeing about double, every year it's 100% plus growth in terms of the download and usage of the tool. So, if you go look at the last 5 years, every year it's kind of doubling. So probably do appreciate that contract testing is not as well widespread as other types of testing. But, if you look at signals in terms of other little tools spinning up, and, you see tools like Postman and, others in that space who talk about doing contract testing because they're trying to find ways to do it in that way. They're all good signals that the market's starting to recognize how contract testing can contribute to your testing strategy and how it can get involved and what part it might play. And obviously, if you've got tools like Postman, which are really widely adopted, particularly as sort of exploratory tools, but also some in the testing community, that's a good signal, I think, to show you that they want to get in on this. I think also, Postman and SmartBear released their API testing report in the last 3 or 6 months, I think it was, and they both sort of mentioned that the contract testing is an emerging trend. So I think we're starting to sort of see that in both Pact and the Pactflow ecosystems.
Yeah, what I see is I don't know how to say that. Most of the people knows how to write tests, but they don't know so much about testing techniques. So from my point of view, contract testing is more well. So they don't know so much for testing of testing strategies. So they don't have to know. They don't have to write tests, okay, or unit tests, but they don't know too much about how to test things. So I think contract testing at first could sound maybe redundant or something like this. So I think most of the people don't quite understand what's the value of contract testing and why what brings new to the table, contract testing. Because at when you first approach to contract testing, you probably think, but what this? Is this unit testing? Is this functional testing? Is this API testing? What's this? So I mean, it's not a problem of the tool, of the technique. It's a concept problem. I think for that reason, it's not a common tool or a mainstream tool, but because what I said before, people need to feel the pain of integration testing. What happened when you make mistakes and you make unnoticed mistakes that could be solved very easily with this tool. First of all, that they need to see this problem, and then when they perceive this problem and they suffer this problem, you can explain, well, with contract tests you can solve this kind of problems. So for that reason, I think it's not a mainstream testing technique. But I think we'll get this point eventually, but maybe I don't know, in the future.
Also, you need to take into account that you need specialized people on this kind of testing technique, at least to set up the pipelines. All the DevOps part is the complicated part. Developing the tests, all that thing is pretty easy. But the other side, using unit tests or end-to-end is pretty straightforward, right? So for establishing this kind of technique, I feel that you need this kind of help we have provided to this client. We were talking. I mean, it's not as easy as, okay, I'm going to start doing contract testing without without any other problem, right? So I think this is another problem, let's say.
It's a great comment there, Alex. If I can maybe just jump in, you sort of just talked about, I think, something that people maybe don't fully appreciate with contract testing, and particularly Pact and I guess Pactflow. But there's kind of this delineation between writing the tests and actually integrating to the pipeline. And I think people associate, those who do understand contract testing very much think of it as breaking change detection, as in preventing breaking changes, which is true. But it doesn't. It probably doesn't reflect the extra capabilities you would get with integrating to the pipeline. And I was just going to ask the question about, in this customer, how you explain those differences and particularly the value, I think. So, you mentioned, can I deploy? Maybe you can talk through a little bit about that aspect of the pipeline. I think what we found in Pactflow, talking to our customers, is that's kind of the aha moment where people go, I can really see how it can add value. I can see how it picks up bugs locally, but then once it gets put into the pipeline, it's like, I kind of get how this is going to change things. Could you maybe talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying, this part of that provides you the automation to deploy whenever you are ready to communicate with your consumer, your provider, or whatever, is the point of inflection. I don't know how to say. In our case, in this client, we get to start working with 2 of the 10 pipelines, corporative pipelines they have, and we have this process automated for previous environment, like development, staging, development and QA, and that was some kind of tricky part, because this was the part where we have to talk more with the tech leads or, management, or more at a high level in this integration, and of course the Jenkins team in this case. But on the side of the development teams, they didn't care very much, to be honest, about that. They were focusing on detecting bugs before pushing my code, And when we started to explain this stuff, this automation, it was, okay, yeah, it's really cool, right? No, but for my day by day, I care about it. But yeah, from my point of view, personally, this is the huge power it provides. I mean, it's not only the detection of bugs. All this automation, whenever you have it working, is tremendous. I mean, and it's so funny to see it working, to be honest, when everything works like it should. But that is the true potential from my point of view.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can jump to another question. Now it's who authored Pact text? Who wants to answer this question?
Maybe I'll ask another question while we're waiting. I think given enough time, I'll probably put everybody to sleep asking questions of this case study because it's super fascinating. Maybe just coming back to some of the basics. What other questions? So, we talked about sort of standard, RESTful services with Pact and those use cases. What other kind of use cases were you looking at in this customer to do contract testing with? Was it something that came up as part of the engagement? What we found in more complicated, bigger environments, like you mentioned your customer is very big. They tend to have lots of different types of technology. It's very heterogeneous. It's very polyglot languages. Did you run into anything like that, and how did you deal with it?
Well, in our case, in this client, we didn't get into that yet. I mean, we were working basically with same technologies, our microservices, Spring Boot based Java, backend. So we didn't get to that point, to be honest.
Okay, maybe we can jump to the next question. The next question is, can I test asynchronous systems message like quiz such Kafka or SNS?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do it. I don't know what else to say. I mean, we can do a demo or something if you want.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think with the move to cloud computing, we've seen events based in subpub systems pop up everywhere. So Kafka and AWS, SNS being one of them. So to name two, and there is already existing support. I think within some of the different repositories, they're under the V3 branch. The Pat V3 specification, if I'm not mistaken, but we will be looking to expand out with bidirectional as well to cover different event types as well. So watch this space, and if there's any new technologies that you'd wish to see support for, then get in touch with us. I know gRPC and Avro are on the cards in the future roadmap.
Okay, thank you.
We'll
next.
be addressing that through plugins.
Okay, perfect. Okay, we jump for the next one also. Can I generate a contract from an open API document?
Yes, we have coined a term provider contract, which is a combination of your open API spec and the evidence that you provide to show that your provider is compliant with that open API spec. So that will be known as a provider contract.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, anything else? Someone? No. Okay, I'm going to the next one. The one is, where and when do pack tests run? On my local machine, against an environment, for example, test servers. Do you hear me?
Yes, we got you loud and clear.
Okay.
So they're depending on which particular flow you take. If you're using the consumer-driven contract flow, or you're on your consumer side, your pack test would run locally against your consumer code base. So you would run your unit testing framework, and you would set up Pact to act as your mock provider. And Pact will intercept those requests made by your client and replay a certain response that can be used by your client code. On the provider side, Pact is used again in bootstrapping, or is used in the verification process. A provider would spin up their local code base, normally run it in their CI/CD pipeline, and they would verify the clients or the consumers' Pact expectations against their providing code base. And there are other kind of moving parts in the Pact ecosystem. So we've got the Pact broker, which is the central store repository for the Pact. And we've got some CLI tools which are used at various points in the CI/CD process, but can also be used locally on people's machines.
Okay.
So it covers the whole of the deployment.
Very good answering. Okay, the people start asking questions directly in the chat. I think we are going to jump directly to that question because it's going to be more interactive with the people. Okay, here I have again, Pierre, thank you for your questions. Does Pact support Quarkum and the future Spring Boot 3 that will be normally released this summer, which will be native instead of the good or GBM?
I'll try and tackle that one. I think we do support Quarkus now. I know that somebody was using it last year and there was an issue with Red Hat that got fixed, and that now makes it work. With the Spring Boot 3, I don't know for sure. I'd say we would, because Spring Boot is probably the largest, alignment with the Pact JVM. It's very, very heavily used. So no doubt that I'm not the maintainer, but no doubt that the maintainers are looking into that, or at least have got their eye towards it when it's coming out. But I would say stay tuned and join the Slack channel.
Okay, perfect. Another one, Ding Long, also come with a question. What is the right approach to slowly introduce contract tests when some microservices in your organization are quite mature?
I can maybe have a quick stab at this one. I think what you're saying is you want to retrofit contract test onto an existing system. So I guess there's two options in the open source ecosystem with Pact. There's going to be, you're going to have to write those tests in the Pactflow domain. We do have that bidirectional feature that might be help with retrofitting, particularly on top of stable APIs, more quickly. But I think the overarching comment I would have there is that when you're looking at contract tests to begin with, you would always find you want to focus on the most valuable things first. I think there's probably, there's other testers on here that have, general advice around that, but you're not going to spend time writing tests for things that are working really well and aren't changing. That wouldn't be the most important thing to do. I would definitely focus on the areas of pain and the areas that are most likely to change, and the areas that are most likely to cause problems. And so I'd focus my efforts there first. And then, over time, if you want to add some extra, grow that the coverage, then you can obviously work backwards from that. But that would be where I would start.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, we have more questions to talk about. Next one is going to be, what are the use cases for bidirectional contract testing? Who wants to answer that? I'm going to be a little bit bad about that because Fran is not talking a lot. I'm coming back. What do you know about bidirectional? Let's do it.
Well, I usually talk a lot. There's no need to talk much more. But as I said before, I think bidirectional contract testing would help in those organizations. We actually have a very big core APIs with a lot of consumer. They don't want to lose the control of. Because they think they lose control if they apply consumer-driven contract. So they want to still have the control of this main API. So in this kind of testing, in this kind of cases, I think bidirectional contract testing would help. Also, as I said before, when you already have this integration test, Postman or whatever test, I think bidirectional will help, because that would be your proof that this actually works, and would have your consumers would have to adapt. I think that I truly believe that in some cases maybe consumer driven is not the right approach. So in this kind of scenarios of cases, I think bidirectional, or I don't know if you may call provider driven, but maybe this kind of approach it's fine, because I think this is very related maybe to Conway's law, maybe. So probably in some organizations, the main API has, for maybe because of the structure of the organization of the company, they work like this, and with bidirectional contract testing, I think this could fit in this kind of organization. So for me, and also this is optional. I mean, you can have bidirectional for one APIs and consumer driven for other APIs. So I think you are covered. So that's right.
Okay, we have a little bit problem of communication between Alicia and me. Do you hear me now? Yes, thank you. I'm going to jump to her and ask her directly. what do you know about what testing tools we can use for the bidirectional contract testing? What do you think?
Very good question. This is a tricky one. I know Matt's waiting to see if I've really learned everything there is about bidirectional contract testing. Obviously, we've already talked a little bit about Postman. That's the tool that we've currently got available. And additionally, OpenAPI spec is now something that we also support, which is going to be really helpful for more than just developers within their teams to really get started with bidirectional contract testing. The guys have also mentioned a couple more tools that we've got on our roadmap, which we'll be bringing out shortly, and they've just slipped my mind. So Matt, I'm handballing to you. You can jump in to get the rest of the question.
Yeah, so I think I guess the first general statement with bidirectional. So from a contract point of view, we currently support OpenAPI specification or documents as the provider contract, and we support Pact as the consumer contract. So on the consumer side of an integration point, as long as you can produce a Pact file, then the work can be done. So you can use Pact to do that. You can use one of our adapters to take your test and convert them, or in the case that you don't have the adapters, you can write your own. So for example, we've got a Cypress, a mock service worker, and a Y mock adapter. So if you use those tools, you can install those adapters and it will generate a Pact file from them. If you don't use them, you can do whatever other tool you're using. Look at Mountebank, for example, or if you're using sort of any kind of mocking tool, as long as you can introspect them, you should be able to convert them into a Pact file. And we've got examples of how to do that in those plugins, and we've also got documentation on how to produce a Pact file. On the provider side of an integration point, right now we support OpenAPI spec. So really, anything you do on the provider side to make sure your API is compatible with that spec is all that we need. So if you're using Postman, that's fine. If you're manually testing things, right? Like you might have a process where you manually check through whatever means that your API is compatible with that spec, and then you give us the spec afterwards. That's fine too. It doesn't really matter how you verify your provider is compatible with the spec, so long as you're comfortable. So that means you can continually use the tools you've already got, Postman or Dread or Rest Assured or any number of tools that can do that. That's fine. And of course, over time, we'll be expanding the types of contracts you can use, and we'll be expanding, the types of comparisons we can do on both sides. So think of GraphQL or protobufs or async API and so on.
Okay, I love to make tricky questions for the people. I feel very, very, very safe doing that kind of things. Okay, we are going to jump to another question. We have here who writes the test. This is going to be easy. I'm not going to point anyone for this one, but please.
So as it is easy, I am going to answer. Basically, the developers, same people that develop the unit test, for example, will be the responsible of defining these contract tests. Actually, the technique is very, very similar. You just have to change your mind to know what you are trying to test. You are not testing the behavior, you are testing the communication, the format of the communication, but will be the same people. Actually, this was part of the savings I was trying to explain, because once the setup of all the integration is done, the inclusion of this kind of testing is very, very easy. I mean, it's part of the development process. The same way you write a new method and you create the unit testing associated, whenever you have a new communication or whenever you modify a communication with one consumer or one provider, you will change your or improve your contract test. So yeah, that developers will be the responsible for that.
So I will just add on to that. Traditionally, consumer-driven contract testing has been primarily the domain of developers. And I know that in the testing community, there's been a lot of excitement around contract testing, and there's still some organizations that sit kind of in silos. So when we talk about that feeling the pain moment, it's the testers on the other side of the development silo who feel that pain. And that's why with the introduction of bidirectional, we're really trying to be able to aim and leverage off some of those popular testing tools as well. So, but yeah, I would definitely say that with the traditional consumer-driven contract flow, it is the domain of developers because it sits within a unit testing framework. Great question.
And maybe just one more comment. Yeah, absolutely. I think the other one is just taking your point there, Yusuf. Like the idea is to, there is a shift going on in the, sort of the QA industry, right? In terms of, that shift left movement, right? And so we see bidirectional as being a bit of a bridge to help, move from that siloed kind of approach you sort of talked about to a more integrated approach. And we just know that takes time. So this hopefully can help, particularly those QA teams who are separate to the engineering squads and don't have access to the code to be able to get involved with this and start driving those different practices without necessarily requiring the organizational transformation to have been completed to do it.
Yeah, and I think that leads into a nice point just about the fact that despite all the automation and things that go on with Pact and contract exchange and verification, there's no replacement for the collaboration that's at the heart. So what we're asking kind of organizations to do is to collaborate sooner and earlier. That shifting left, you find those defects sooner. So that's why we advocate for people writing documents in Swagger and testing them with contract testing. So yeah, awesome.
Okay, we have a small technical problems, and we are going to come back to the question of Dean Long because Matt and Alicia wants to include more answers to this question. I'm going to say it again. What's the right approach to slowly introduce contract tests when some microservices in your organization are quite mature?
Cool. I can try and tackle that one. So basically, I would start with finding that ecosystem of services you've already got, identifying the ones that change the most because they're the ones, if it's not changing, it's unlikely to break. So I wouldn't start there. I would start with the services that are likely to change more often, and then inside that subset of services, I would find the ones that are the most problematic. So if inside those mature ecosystem, you do happen to have some services that are a bit iffy and the ones that are likely to cause challenges or problems later down the track, for instance, that maybe you're changing the consumers of that. You might be building a new user interface or a new application that uses those services. They're the ones you'd want to get contract tests on because there's more risks involved with changing them. Just like anything in testing, I would start with the ones with looking at that risk-based approach, looking at things that are likely to cause problems and focusing your efforts there. And then over time, assessing the value of adding it to other parts of that services environment.
Okay, interesting. Also, we are going to come to this other question for Dean Long. Is how do we get contract testing involved into early phase of microservices development?
Who wants to grab that one?
Go on, Matt.
I've talked too much, but I can.
That sounds like a perfect opportunity to get contract testing when it's in that early phase of microservice development. We spoke before about Greenfield. So at that point, whether you're coming in as a developer or tester, if you're interested about contract testing, just have a whiteboard session or a remote call now that we're kind of still working from home, but start off with that conversation about what kind of your organization, what quality means to you, what testing means to you, and where those kind of risky points. Well, as you build a new service, you're going to naturally have integration points between them. So just think about how you're going to test them and open that conversation up to your team, because I think as the team have shown today, it takes organizational change, and you have to build those champions. So getting people on side at the start is great, and if you are starting your microservice journey, then you're at the perfect kind of point to do that.
Actually, there is one thing that is pretty cool when you start implementing contract testing on Greenfield, as we were saying, is that you actually don't need the provider to exist to start developing your contract testing, right? Actually, you can use the pact you generate even to mock the provider. I mean, imagine you know how it's going to be your provider, but your provider will be developed 6 months from now because of any reason. You can start defining these contracts, and actually Pactflow provides the functionality to simulate a mock with this contract. So you can start doing like real requests even though this provider does not exist. So yeah, it's the perfect situation to start implementing.
Yeah, I also want to add that we don't. I mean, well, companies don't must forget that this is not only pure technical thing, because all starts with conversation, with communication between teams. So if you actually want to introduce contract testing, you have to start with communication. You have to have your teams aligned, because well, I think we all here are technical people. It's very common to start thinking how to implement this, what do I need, the pipelines, the JVM or whatever. Obviously, it's important, but for me, the most important thing is the communication between teams, because all of this starts with two teams getting together in a meeting or a planning session or whatever, defining the contract, the actual contract, the communication, the schema, and this is the key. If the communication fails, contract testing won't work. And this is something that we explain, and we will repeat a lot of times, that this phase, the communication phase, these starting meetings are the key of the process, because if this fails, process won't work, and it's not that the tool is failing or the technique is not right. It's because your process is not okay for contract testing. So as well, going back to the question, if you want to introduce contract testing from the beginning, obviously with a greenfield project is like the best situation, but you have to, teams must work together. They will need to have fluent communication. This is something crucial for contract testing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Very, 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 very interesting. Okay, guys. I think we need to start, or maybe it's time to end this event. Okay. Before we close the event, Alicia wants to recommend something for our audience. Please, Alicia.
Thanks, Juan. Realizing that it's getting late for half of our speakers here, but of course, we really enjoyed the conversation here, and I'm hoping to continue it over on the Pact Slack community. We have thrown that link to join, if you're not already a member, into the chat. So please do jump on over. Matt and I, and maybe Alex might be around. I'm sure Juan, Fran, and Yusuf might want to be getting to bed pretty soon, because it's pretty late where you guys are. But that was my last note. Please do join up on Slack. We are available to contact directly if you've got any additional questions.
Thank you, Alicia. Okay, we are going to finalize this, but I want to announce something for the end. We think we are going to produce another event soon, maybe offline, maybe online, maybe with more features of Pactflow, maybe with more customers, who knows? But for sure, it's going to be again about contract testing and quality assurance. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Matt, Yusuf, Alex, and of course, Fran. Thank you very much for sharing all this knowledge. I'm delighted to help you with this. Also, a big hug for the people of Stage 1. Alejandro, thank you. Not the Alejandro Pena, the other Alejandro who are helping us.
The hiding one.
Thank you very much for being with us until the end. We hope you enjoy all this event like us. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, folks. Thanks, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.